The year is 2010 and Kid Cudi is still feeling the effects of his crazy year in 2009. In 2009, Kid Cudi will release his debut solo album, Man on the Moon, The End of Day, which peaked at number 4 on the Billboard 200 chart, selling 104,000 copies in its first week. This album also had Kid Cudi's first ever lead single, Day and Night, which would peak at number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100. That song was released in February of 2008 and would catapult Cudi's career. In 2008, we would also see the release of Cudi's debut mixtape, A Kid Named Cudi, in July, and many people clicking this video already probably know of Cudi's involvement in Kanye West's album 808s and Heartbreaks, which released later that year in November. Let's get back to Kid Cudi's debut album though. He released the album and it was a success, and we all know how influential this album came to be, and some people watching, including me, may have been greatly affected by this album, or pretty much almost all of Kid Cudi's albums in general. The phrase some people might throw around a lot when it comes to music is sophomore slump. By definition, a sophomore slump refers to an instance in which a second or sophomore effort fails to live up to the relatively high standards of the first effort. A lot of artists tend to do really well on their first album, but when it comes to following that up and rising to that occasion the second time, a lot tend to not deliver, and in this case, they may slump. Just imagine being an artist and you just had a very successful album and now you're being asked to do it all over again, but instead it has to be even better than the first one. Imagine that pressure. This is what Cudi was faced with, and this is where the story of Man on the Moon 2, The Legend of Mr. Rager begins. Before I get more into the video, I would first like to thank you guys for coming to see this, because you guys can be doing a million other things right now, but instead you're here with me and I appreciate that. If you guys like the content, you guys should like, comment, and subscribe to help the channel grow. Also, follow my Instagram too, that would be greatly appreciated. This man's music definitely changed my life, and this video is long overdue for me. But without further ado, I give you Man on the Moon 2, The Legend of Mr. Rager, the story behind a classic. So the sort of first inklings that we got of what was in store for Kid Cudi's sophomore album and albums to come was when Cudi did an interview in August of 2009, and he would say this: yes, it's definitely a trilogy. Man on the Moon, The Ghost in the Machine is the second album, and we're still working on the title for the third Man on the Moon. Once the story is told, I'm done, man, unless something else happens to me. Once I'm done with the third album, I'm just going to do collabs. I think us Kid Cudi fans saw how this quote turned out. We saw how it turned out, but the original name for his sophomore album, as we heard, was originally going to be Man on the Moon, The Ghost in the Machine, which to me is a really dope title, I must say. He also literally said this a couple weeks before his debut album actually came out, so he already had a plan in mind for a whole trilogy with the series. Literally a month after his debut album came out though, there was reports of Kid Cudi doing a project titled Cutter. In an interview with MTV, Kid Cudi had this to say about the project. Cutter is basically an album of me working with artists that have inspired me, or artists that have helped me grow, and people who I've always admired. So far, we've got Snoop, Travis Barker, trying to get Green Day on board, hopefully Kings of Leon, hopefully. I'm really trying to do all the collabs that I couldn't do for the Man on the Moon album, and then some, because the album was so themed that I had to strip a lot of features. We're going to have the clips on this compilation, Robin Thicke. Hopefully we're going to get in the studio. I just did a record for his upcoming album. It's amazing. Also in the interview, it said that Cudi wanted to have this project out by the summertime of 2010 at the latest. As many of us probably know, this project never ended up happening, and I've actually considered talking about this topic on my Lost/Found Rap Media Volume series that I'm doing. Definitely go check that out because a lot of people like it, and I'll put a link to the playlist in the description so you guys can enjoy. If you have more insight on what happened to Cutter, then definitely let me know, but let's get back to the story. So originally, the project was entitled Cutter, but then Cudi would later change it to be called Cutter and the Revolution of Evolution. A few months went by, and then there was a change of plans. Cudi would post a blog and he said that he scrapped Cutter in favor for a project that is more personal. He would also say, a lot of you have read the news and think they know Cudi. Got slick stuff to say amongst your peers or just flat out hate me, but you haven't the slightest clue of who I am. I will tell the story of Mr. Rager. So now this is where the name of what would be his sophomore album came from. Cudi was now going to tell the story of Mr. Rager. Also on that same blog, Cudi would say this about what fans can expect from his upcoming album. Man on the Moon 2 is dark by nature, and instead of bringing you into my dreams like my first album, I'm bringing you into my reality, good and bad. It will explain more of who I am as well as pushing the envelope musically. So as you can hear from Cudi himself, his sophomore album was going to be a lot more darker in nature, and this album was supposed to bring people into his reality. On his debut album, Cudi was the lonely stoner, but now after the success of his debut album, his lifestyle changed. The women, the parties, the drugs, etc. were now coming into the picture, and he had access to all of that in abundance with his newfound fame. Before his sophomore album, Cudi was really going through it. He'd been arrested, had scuffles with fans, and we can only imagine what his mental state was like at that time. He talked about that stuff in interviews, and I can even link an interview he did with Complex in 2010 where he talks about that stuff and what he was going through at that time. But in that interview with Complex that I'm referring to, Kid Cudi was asked when did he decide to switch from Cutter to Man on the Moon 2, The Legend of Mr. Rager, and he would say, when I started making records like Erase Me, I wanted this album to be fun, but the dark stuff was my life at that point. I was fighting not to write that stuff. It got frustrating writing a collab album. I just lost interest, and it became more of a task rather than something I wanted to do. That's not how it's supposed to feel. The day it becomes work, you need to retire. Now, some backstory behind the release and promotion of Man on the Moon 2, The Legend of Mr. Rager, is that it was originally supposed to release in August of 2010, but in July of that year, it was revealed that the album would be delayed and due for release in late September. Then October came, and then the album cover and track list was finally revealed along with the official release date. Now, tracking back a little bit more to delve into more history behind this album is that in June of 2010, Cudi announced that he would be performing at the Babe store in New York and left a message saying "For the Revolution." Later on that night, he would perform the song Revolvev. A couple months later, Erase Me, Wildin' Cause I'm Young, and Mr. Rager would get released on a mixtape, and in August of 2010, the first official single for the album Erase Me, featuring Kanye West, was released. The song would peak at number 22 on the Billboard Hot 100, and as of today, the song is double platinum, and at the time, proved to be another hit for Kid Cudi. Here's what Cudi had to say about that record in an interview. Erase Me was fun as F to make, but it's just different. It was effing around, just to show people I can do whatever. That's my main goal now, just to show people no matter what I do, I'm going to make stuff that's in good taste. Might not be your cup of tea, but it's going to be authentic. It's not going to be forced. In October, Cudi would release the second official single off of Man on the Moon 2, The Legend of Mr. Rager, which was Mr. Rager. We'll talk a little bit more about this track later when we break down the album, but a couple days after that was officially released, we would then see the release of the track These Worries. A couple days after that, we would see Cudi release a trailer for the album, and then it was soon revealed that Cudi was releasing a short film titled after the track Maniac off of the album. The film was going to be directed by actor Shia LaBeouf. We would see the release of Man on the Moon 2, The Legend of Mr. Rager in November of 2010, and it peaked at number 3 on the Billboard 200 with first week sales of 169,000 copies. As of today, the album is platinum, and now in the next section of this video, we'll get into the music and the story of the album itself. The album starts off with the track Scott Miss Cudi vs. the World featuring CeeLo, which is in reference to the comic book turned movie Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. In this track, Kid Cudi welcomes the listener to his mind, which is Act 1, the world I am ruling, with all his thoughts, feelings, and emotions. Just like Kid Cudi did on Man on the Moon, The End of Day, and what we would see on Man on the Moon 3, The Chosen, Kid Cudi divides these albums in the Man on the Moon trilogy into acts or different movements. The World I Am Ruling is the title of the first of 5 acts on Man on the Moon 2. Sky Miss Cudi vs. The World and Revafev are the 2 tracks in the first movement. The second movement, which is titled Act 2, A Stronger Trip, starts off with Don't Play This Song featuring Mary J. Blige, where Kid Cudi describes his battle with substance abuse while telling listeners to not play the song if they don't want to see such a travesty. We can skip ahead to track number 5, which is Marijuana, and I mean the meaning of this track is pretty self-explanatory. It's pretty self-explanatory. Cudi had this to say about the song. I felt it around the time I was doing Man on the Moon 2. I was like, man, I'm going to make a song called Marijuana. I felt it would put me deeper in that little pocket. If you ask me, that's the best smoking song ever made. I went out to achieve and accomplish that. Now we get into the last track in this movement, which is Mojo So Dope. It's a great chill closeout song for the section, but this song actually got Cudi some heat when he said the lines, "I live through words, not metaphors, so I passed the rest of the freshmen." This is what Cudi had to say about this line in an interview. I didn't want anybody to take it the wrong way because it wasn't a diss, but most of the rappers that everyone loves are rappers that use metaphors. That's not my style of rap. I like to rhyme in a more poetic way. Sometimes you don't have to use these witty ways of trying. It just sounds like somebody is overselling stuff. So Cudi had this little thing with Wale, and they would go back and forth with each other, and it was never like nothing like too crazy between the two. But yeah, but that's like totally something that I didn't even like know, and I kind of like forgot about before like making this video, was his little situation with Wale. And I think that out of that whole XXL class, I think that it's safe to say that Currency and Kid Cudi are definitely the best. Like, I'm being very honest with you. Currency and Kid Cudi are definitely the best. I mean, some of like Wale's older stuff is cool, and B.O.B. and Ace Hood, like, you know, like they had their little time, but yeah, like overall, like this class did not age well. Like, it definitely did not. Now we get into Act 3, Party On, and this starts off with the 7th track, Ashton Kutcher, which is pretty much another weed song, like. But this is where the party starts. The track after that would be Erase Me, and the track after Erase Me leaves the tracks Wildin' Cause I'm Young and The Mood, which continues the party theme on this act, the drugs, the women, etc. The track The Mood marks the end of the act and pretty much is the last bit of the lighter themes on this album. After this song, the theme and vibe of the album is much more darker, and we would immediately realize that with the next track. Act 4, The Transformation, starts with the 11th track on the album, which is titled Maniac, featuring Cage and St. Vincent. Cudi fully explores the darker parts of his personality, and at the beginning of his verse in the song, he embraces that he's a maniac. He's the ghoul, and he's the shadow in the corner of his room. Upon listening to this track, the listener immediately gets met with distorted sounds, and you know things are definitely changing up on the album. There's also a short film titled after this song that Kid Cudi is in, which I kind of mentioned earlier. This is what Cudi had to say about the film. It was me creating the backstory for this person in my mind. What you see just seems like senseless acts of crime happening, but in my character's mind, it was always justified. When you watch it, it's like, why are these things happening? You want answers, but there's no answers really given. When I was in character, it was always justified for me. When it came time to shoot, it was as real as possible, and you were scared of this character. I literally transformed into this person. I didn't talk much on set, didn't crack many jokes. I kept to myself. The next track on the album, Mr. Rager, however, to me, is one of my favorite tracks on the album, but definitely probably the darkest. Kid Cudi put out a tweet in 2013 where he talked about the song, saying that it was about a time he almost overdosed, quoting the lyrics, "When will the fantasy end?" which is his life, and "When will the heaven begin?" which to him is death. Cudi has said in an interview with Complex that this song is about someone who is fed up with reality, someone who looks for thrills and excitement by any means, and it's just kind of how Cudi was feeling at that point. He was just so angry, and he was doing drugs to sort of revive himself. There was something about knowing that he was so close to death every time that intrigued him. That is just some deep stuff right there, and I must say, the music video for this song is amazing. Definitely one of my personal favorites of all time, and there's a lot of theories about the video and what everything means. Definitely look up the video. It's easy to find, and if you haven't, please go watch it. Like, I promise you that you will probably like it. It's been out for years, so if you haven't seen it yet, then like you're like literally bugging. And yo, like upon seeing the video, like you might get the deeper purpose of the track. I can sit here all day like talking and breaking down the song Mr. Rager itself, but we gotta keep the ball rolling. The track after Mr. Rager is These Worries, featuring Mary J. Blige again. This is another pretty dark track, and before both of the verses Cudi delivers in this song, the audience hears him snort. What is he snorting? Put two and two together. But in this song, we would get a deeper dive into Cudi's mental state and the worries that he has. Cudi tries to use alcohol and drugs to cope with his worries and realizes that he's not doing so well and lied to his own mom about it because Cudi cares about her and he doesn't want her to know of the things that he has done because he doesn't want her to worry or disapprove of his actions. After this track, we get into the last track of this act, which is titled The End, featuring GLC, Chip the Ripper, and Nicole Ray. The song is about lessons or mistakes and things each GLC, Cudi, and Chip will never do again. Cudi talks about his drug usage and vividly describes his tug of war with them. Now we get into Act 5, You Live and You Learn, and we start off with the 15th track on the album, All Along. Originally, this was supposed to be the last song on the album. Cudi had this to say about the song in an interview. I was living the album out as I was creating it. When I quit the drugs and was ready to wrap the album, I did 3 new tracks that I felt were the conclusion. It was going to end with All Along, which is just a very sad song to end an album. On this song, Cudi realizes that he will forever be alone in some sort of way. The next track is Ghost, and it's more of Cudi talking about his struggles, and in this track, he talks about how he feels like a ghost with all the things going on in his life. The last track on the album, if we're not counting the bonus track maybe, is Trapped in My Mind. Trapped in My Mind is about how Cudi finds himself trapped in his mind and how he doesn't think he'll ever go. Cudi feels blessed and cursed because of the dark journey that he went through and how it took a toll on him. With that journey came an amazing story that many people could relate to and use to help themselves, and I think that's the beauty of Cudi's music, and his music has saved a lot of people's lives, man. Like, just thinking about it just makes me smile. But like, Cudi is like the GOAT, man. Like, Cudi is like the GOAT, man. But this pretty much wraps up this section of the video where I briefly discussed the theme of the album and the theme behind a lot of the songs on it. Now we're about to close it out. In conclusion, this album is definitely a classic and in my opinion, the second best solo album in his discography, behind the first Man on the Moon, only by a couple inches though, personally. Like, I really wanted to do this video on this album and not the first one because everyone talks about the first one, and Cudi's second album definitely needs some more love. This was a very, 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 very personal video for me because I think some people close to me in my personal life know that I'm a huge Kid Cudi fan, but many viewers of this channel probably don't know that, and I've been thinking about doing a video on him since I started this channel. I knew that I had to do one when I thought that the time was right, and man, I think that it's safe to say that Cudi really, really changed my life and my perspective on music. I've been a Cudi fan ever since my cousin put me onto him when I was like in elementary school, and I remember hearing Day and Night and instantly becoming a fan. I was a kid and I saw the video on TV and I thought it was like the coolest thing ever. I hate that today I talked about a couple topics that I don't necessarily like talking about on my channel, like the drugs and stuff like that, because when it comes to talking about an artist, I really like to focus on the music and appreciate their music and not really delve into subjects like that. But in this case, pretty much all of the stuff that we talked about was in the music. I pray that all my subs and the people out there who are watching are okay and know that it doesn't matter how you start, it matters how you finish. Cudi is now sober and he seems to be in a much better place than when he was while making this album, and I couldn't be more happier for him. I'm glad you guys watched the video until the end if you did, and yo, tell me what you guys thought of the video. What is your favorite song or songs from this project? Is it a classic? Why or why not? Let me know in the comment section below. I love you guys. Peace.